I make it 10 o'clock, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, it is.
Andrew, can you mute everyone's mics except the ones that we don't want muted? Is that possible?
Ethan can.
Ethan, can you mute everyone that we don't want muted for the time being, please?
Sure, of course.
And Bill, technically you're the chairman of the company, but maybe I can act as chairman of the meeting and we'll call things to order.
I think I have to call it to order, but we'll see here.
The official part.
The official part, yeah. Well, okay, so I'll call the Zoom meeting to order, and I will leave our wonderful chairman, Bill, the ability to call the formal part of the business to order. But it's my honor to welcome everyone to this call. As we were saying before the call started formally, we had no idea what to expect. So it's nice to see we've got some participation, and it's really nice to welcome a couple of people in particular. I know one of our shareholders is tuning in from Singapore, so that's a change. And it's really a delight to welcome Rand Cannon to the call. Rand is our new institutional shareholder that was referenced in our press release. Rand's a terrific guy who we met through the industry just recently, and who came in on our private placement, and we're delighted to have Covista Capital as a shareholder. So Rand, it's a pleasure to have you. A couple of other introductions, one who will say a few words, but first, Benj Gallender, who was speaking before. Benj is an old and dear friend of mine, and he's been a great friend to Char, although he just joined our board this year. Benj is president of Contra the Herd and one of Canada's foremost investors that comes from the contrarian side. Appears regularly in the media and has a great reputation and high profile as one of Canada's foremost contrarian investors. As I mentioned before, he often dresses like a homeless person, but he can afford to because he's been so successful as an investor. We're delighted to have Benj join our board of directors, and we know he's going to be a huge help to the company. It's also my pleasure to introduce Mark Correll. Mark will say a few words. Mark's a CPA and CFA with over 20 years experience. He's been a highly regarded CFO, including being CFO of Xenon. Many know that company because it was one of Canada's greatest clean tech companies of all time. We saw mutual benefit in having Mark join Char. Mark, Bill White, our chairman, and I were all classmates in the ICD program at Rotman. So we knew each other. Mark and I knew each other previously, but the three of us got to know each other well during that program. And it was really a terrific opportunity seeing, again, the mutual benefit for him to join Char. Mark, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, James. I was certainly intrigued by the Char opportunity. I saw a company as having the company as having a strong and unique competitive position, which was on the verge of explosive growth, just by being able to commercialize its proprietary technologies. And based on my experience, that transition phase is one of the most exhilarating times that a company can go through in its life cycle. So I'm certainly very excited to be on the team, and I look forward to contributing to its success.
So just a couple more words before we get to the formal business. We will have a management presentation after the formal business. We've got some great guest speakers, Mike Dupre from Walker, Brandon Moffat from Stormfisher, and Peter MacArthur, who's from the Ontario Clean Tech Industry Association, as well as RBC. But just a couple of words on this year before we get into the formal business. It's been a challenging year because of the pandemic, not just for business, but for life in general. But we've seen it as a great opportunity for a bunch of reasons. One of the big ones being the Biden administration coming in the new year will be a huge help to our industry in general. While we've had, in my 30 years of experience in the clean tech world, we've had Democratic and Republican governments, definitely the Democrats have been better for our industry in general. And while we would have survived through another Trump 4 years, we believe that 2021 is going to bring great opportunity for our sector in general. So the wind's blowing in the right direction. The other thing I'd like to mention is we had a very successful capital raise. We were not in a position of weakness, but we wanted to avoid that. We wanted to make sure that we were in a position of strength. So we did a defensive capital raise to ensure that our balance sheet was strong, and that not knowing how long this pandemic effect is going to have, we wanted to make sure that, again, solid balance sheet would give us a good foothold to last as long as necessary for our business to get traction. Our business has continued. We're essential, and our consulting side has done fine. Our major projects have taken a little longer, and we're not sure how much longer they're going to take to solidify. And so putting some money on the balance sheet seemed to be a good idea. We intended to raise between 250 and 500. Most of you probably know we raised 695,000 and could have raised more. We brought in our first institutional investor, as I mentioned, Covista Capital, and we believe that these steps have been a terrific platform, and it's been reflected in our stock price, which has ticked up since we closed that financing, and we're really enthusiastic about what's coming in 2021. We still got lots of work to do, but we believe we're in a position with our, add to the board of directors with Ben Gallagher, with our new CFO, Mark Coral, and regardless, pandemic or no pandemic, we believe Char is very well positioned to capitalize on the opportunities that are going to come in 2021. Anyway, with that lead in, I'll pass the torch to Bill White, who will take us through the formal business. And one more slide. Oh, thanks, Andrew. My favorite. Well, some people say it's my favorite slide. Forward-looking statements. Most business presentations that have a forward-looking statement, ignore it or cursor through it as quickly as possible. Say the lawyers say you have to have this slide. Well, for me personally, I look at the statement and say, I'm a big investor in Char. I'm the biggest shareholder. I have almost 7 million shares. My mother, my brother, and all 3 of my sisters are shareholders. Most of my nephews and nieces are shareholders. And I've put my money where my mouth is in Char. I've never sold a share, don't intend to sell any, certainly not at these prices. And I believe there's tremendous upside. If you cannot afford to lose the money you have invested in Char, don't invest in it, because there is risk like there is in anything. But if it's not successful, I will be the biggest loser. Andrew and I both have a huge commitment into this business, and we're both confident that it's going to pay off. But like in anything, there is risk. So I hope you're a happy shareholder and hope that you are confident, like we are, that there's a tremendous opportunity. The forward-looking statement is a good reminder to say there's risk, but there's tremendous upside. Thanks, Andrew. With that, Bill, we'll pass it to you to go through the formal business.
Okay, thank you, James. Yes, this is the formal part. Pretty dry because it's scripted, but we'll get through it and it's important. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill White, Chairman of the corporation, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 Annual Special Meeting of Shareholders of Char Technologies Limited. And I'll act as chairman of this formal part of the meeting. As stated in the Management Information Circular, in order to proactively deal with the unprecedented public health impact of COVID-19 and in compliance with the provincial and federal guidance regarding public gatherings, shareholders have been encouraged not to attend this meeting in person, but to vote by proxy in advance of the meeting and to call into the telephone conference line to listen to the meeting. As noted in the circular, you will not be able to vote or to change any previous proxy vote over the telephone conference line. On behalf of the corporation, I thank you for your forbearance and cooperation during these trying times. So the meeting will now come to order, and with your approval, I shall ask Andrew Todd to act as secretary of the meeting and Oliver King of TSX Trucks Company to act as scrutineer. I now instruct the secretary, to table the meeting for the meeting the following documents. That would be the notice of meeting, the instrument of proxy, the Management Information Circular dated October 16th, 2020, and the audited financial statements and management discussion and analysis of the corporation for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2019. I will also confirm that the above material was sent to each director and the corporation's auditors. These documents are tabled in order that any shareholder may examine same if so desired. In view of the fact that the notice of meeting and a statutory declaration proving service in accordance with the relevant bylaws of the corporation have been tabled and are available for inspection, I will now entertain a motion that the reading of the notice of meeting and a statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the reading of the notice of meeting and the statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with.
Can I have a second?
Eric, if you're trying to second, you're muted.
Oh, I second the motion.
It has now been moved and seconded that the reading of the notice of meeting and the statutory declaration proving service thereof be dispensed with. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Any contrary? Okay, the motion's been carried unanimously. Would the scrutineer please report the number of shareholders present in person and the total number of shares they represent, together with the number of shares represented by proxy?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are a total of 625,750 shares represented in person at the meeting. We have received 23,361,645 shares that represented and by proxy. This equals the total number of shares represented at the meeting at 23,987,395 shares, which represents 46.05% of the issued and outstanding.
So there is a quorum present and proof of notice calling the meeting has been given in accordance with the corporation's bylaws and the Business Corporations Act of Ontario. I now declare that the meeting is regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business, and instruct the secretary to make the declaration of mailing and attached exhibit as Schedule A to the minutes of the meeting. I now present to the meeting the consolidated statements of financial position and related financial statements of the corporation as at September 30th, 2019, together with the report thereon of the auditors of the corporation to the shareholders. Copies of such documents have been mailed to all shareholders, and it is not proposed to read them to the meeting unless anyone objects. I will now ask that someone move and someone second a resolution that the auditor's report be taken as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the auditor's report on the financial statements of the corporation for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2019 be taken as read.
A second?
I second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Are there any contrary? Okay, the motion is carried. It is now in order to proceed with the election of directors for the ensuing year. Accordingly, 7 directors are to be elected, and I declare the meeting open for nominations.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate the following persons as directors of the corporation for the ensuing year: Ian Anderson, Eric Butel, Lyle Clark, Benjamin Gallander, Enzo Macri, William White, and myself, James Sproula.
The nominees named are nominees of the management as disclosed in the circular. Are there any further nominations?
Mr. Chair, no, not yet.
Would someone move that the nominations be closed?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the nominations be closed.
Can we have a second?
I second the motion.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Hearing none, the motion is carried. I hereby declare the nominations closed. Would someone move, therefore, a resolution for election of those persons nominated as directors?
Mr. Chairman, I move that Ian Anderson, Eric Butel, Lyle Clark, Benjamin Gallander, Enzo Macri, William White, and myself, James Sproula, be and hereby elected as directors of the corporation to hold office until the next annual meeting or until their successors are elected or appointed.
Second?
I second the motion.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Hearing none, the motion is carried. I hereby declare those persons duly elected as the directors of the corporation. The next item of business is a resolution appointing auditors for the ensuing year and authorizing the directors to fix their remuneration. As noted in the circular, DMCL LLP were first appointed as auditors for the corporation on December 12th, 2018. Would someone move, therefore, the reappointment of DMCL LLP as the auditors of the corporation and to authorize the directors to fix their remuneration?
Mr. Chairman, I move that DMCL LLP Chartered Accountants be appointed as auditors of the corporation for the ensuing year to serve as at such remuneration as may be fixed by the board of directors.
And a second?
I second the motion.
All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Any contrary? Hearing none, the motion is carried unanimously. I declare that DMCL LLP Chartered Accountants are appointed by the auditors of the corporation for the ensuing year or until their successors are appointed to serve at such remuneration as may be fixed by the board of directors. The next item of business is to consider, and if deemed advisable, to pass with or without variation an ordinary resolution to reapprove for the ensuing year the corporation's incentive stock option plan, most recently approved by the shareholders of the corporation on March 21st, 2019. All as set out on page 22, Schedule A of the circular. Are there any questions from shareholders relating to this resolution? In order for this resolution to be effective, it must be passed by a majority of the votes cast at the meeting. If there are no further questions, I would request a motion authorizing the reapproval of the stock option plan.
Mr. Chairman, I move be it resolved that number one, the plan be hereby approved, and number two, anyone director or officer of the corporation is authorized on behalf of the corporation to execute and deliver all documents and do all things as such person may determine to be necessary or advisable to give effect to this resolution.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Are there any contrary? The motion is carried. I hereby declare that the resolution reapproving the stock option plan has been passed by a majority of votes cast at the meeting. Unless there is any further business to come before the meeting, I would entertain a motion to terminate this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this meeting be terminated.
Second?
I second the motion. I thought I'd keep you in suspense for a little while.
Yeah, you were a little slow on that one.
I know, it's just a joke.
The motion has been moved and finally seconded. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Are there any contrary? Hearing none, the motion has been carried unanimously. So I thank you for your attendance, and I hereby declare the meeting terminated.
Thanks, Bill.
Next is the management presentation.
Yeah, so Andrew, will pass the torch to you. I don't believe we need any other comments before.
No,
Take over.
perfect. Thanks, thanks, James. Thanks, Bill. It's a hard act to follow, but I'll do my best to be as engaging as possible for that exciting formal business. So my presentation, it's going to be roughly 10 minutes. I'm going to start with some of the introductory refreshers for those of you who are new to the story or new to the company. And then we'll get into some of the review of what we've been up to and what we're really excited about for this. So in general, to implement, let me just mute Benj, to implement clean tech and environmentally sustainable solutions that affect global change, and really to be leaders in industrial clean air, water, soils, and waste, contributing to the circular economy. So we'll get in a little bit about what that means. So the overview, most of you are here because you know that we are publicly traded on the TSXV under the ticker YES. We have two divisions. One is Alltech Environmental Consulting. That's our environmental engineering services and compliance group. And then our other division is Char Tech Solutions, which is where we house our advanced industrial clean tech for air, water, and waste reduction, as well as renewable energy. So quickly on the Alltech side, We have a very diverse industrial sector, it's pretty broad range. And a lot of these are long-term relationships with recurring clients where we're acting as basically an outsourced environmental department for these firms, helping with compliance, resource efficiency, and the like. Within Char Tech Solutions, the technology side, the clean tech markets are in food and beverage. We have done work in mining, waste processing, and renewable energy is really our growth area. And then general industrial, we have scrubbers at industrial automotive facilities like Honda, aerospace, paint manufacturing and use, and really any industrial site that has some issues. So to give you an idea of what we've done, here's some reference installation. So the first one is our pyrolysis plant. I'll be talking a lot more about pyrolysis, but we were the, of course, EPCM to fabricate that facility and deliver it to our subsidiary, Char Biocarbon, who is the owner and operator of the facility. The second is a reverse osmosis plant. This was for a Canadian food and beverage manufacturer. This one was delivered during the first lockdown in March and April, and we were able to deliver it even with the constraints and the uncertainties that sort of March and April brought to us this year. And then the third is our membrane bioreactor, and this was the first system in the world that was used to upgrade effluent wastewater for reuse in production. And we know we are the first system in the world because Coca-Cola claimed that they did it first 2 years after this plant was first commissioned. So we can be pretty confident in our statement because Coke has a much better marketing budget, but they missed this one. So we like to be really on the edge, the cutting edge of some of these clean air, clean water, and some of the waste processing opportunities. So a quick slide on the financial overview. It may be hard to believe, but this is the annual general meeting for our fiscal 2019, which ended in September of 2019. So now 12 months on. Obviously we were supposed to generally have the meeting in March, but with COVID, everything obviously got extended. So we've added a third column here on the financial overview of our most recent 9-month numbers to give all shareholders a better, more accurate representation of where we are today. So just a couple of takeaways that I'd like to leave everyone with. First is, since 2018, I think we've done a very good job at managing cash. It's been flat, even though we've been making a lot of investments in growth opportunities and technology development. You see a decline in assets over the period, and that's really as we use up our various government grant programs that we secured kind of back in 2018 to build some of our pyrolysis technology offerings and get to the demonstration stage. Similarly, for liabilities, we have a long-term component of those grants, and we've basically been spending the majority of it through 2018 and 2019. And finally, on the revenue, we see an increase from 2018 to 2019. If you look at our 9-month 2020 numbers, you can see the trend was to increase revenue again, and this was primarily through our consulting division. But while increasing revenue, we've been able to bring expenses down, so we see continued growth in our EBITDA. And of course, as James mentioned, we had a subsequent event. On October 16th, we closed a oversubscribed private placement. So obviously today our cash position is even stronger than it was at our 9-month reporting, which was in June. So some of the highlights, Char Technologies in general, we continue to find and add efficiencies, which is reducing some of our expense lines while also growing revenue, both of which have a positive impact on our EBITDA. And I would say we've definitely got more interest in the capital markets program. Part of that's been due to our efforts in investor relations, and part of that is due to the market that we're in and the progress that we've been making. It's been noticed. And as James mentioned, our private placement was oversubscribed, and we were able to add an institutional investor in October. For Alltech, for the consulting group, we saw revenue growth despite some of our COVID challenges. And due to our team size, we really see an opportunity to quickly pivot to some of the new potential service offerings. So, an example of this is adding virtual environmental audits, which traditionally have been done in person, but with COVID access limitations, being able to do it virtually is a great benefit to some of our clients. On the Char Tech Solutions side, so the technology equipment piece, we've made significant progress in our market profile. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. The most encouraging piece is we have not seen any technology setbacks. The pyrolysis plant, we brought it up, we commissioned it, and we operated it as expected, and we're able to demonstrate it to a number of potential clients and partners. The only thing that's a little slower is the decision timelines. Our clients are in trade exposed industries, our clients are in food and beverage, animal protein manufacturing. So some of our larger projects that we expected in 2019 or early 2020 have been pushed out a little bit because of this decision timelines, but they're still progressing. We're still working with the clients. It's just the timeline that's been extended. And really on some of these big projects, we expect that timeline to now be end of December, early January. So while extended, we certainly see the light at the end of the extension tunnel. So pyrolysis is what we are really developing and what we're most excited about. So this is what our plant in London, Ontario is. And what it does is convert challenging organic waste streams, things like biosolids, so the leftovers from wastewater treatment plants, things like manure and compost, things like crop waste, things like wood waste, and converts it into two primary products. One is clean energy in the form of a gas, which could be renewable natural gas, and the other is biocarbon, which we have a number of applications for. And within the realm of what we're doing, there's a number of market opportunities, both on the feedstock side, so things like biosolids management, and on the output side from our biocoal to the renewable natural gas opportunities. So this is a picture of our London facility. Basically, the way the whole plant works is we put this waste in this box. It's heated in the complete absence of oxygen to high temperatures, 850 degrees Celsius. And because it's heated without oxygen, it doesn't burn, but it produces our products. So because of that, we show a carbon negative plant because it produces its own pyrolysis gas to fuel the system. So that third bullet, energy generation, it's actually self-sufficient on its own gas that it produces. It reduces the mass of the organic waste that we process. And the reason that's important is because many clients are spending a tip fee, which is dollars per ton of waste to dispose of their waste. So if we can drastically reduce how much material we're working with, we can drastically reduce those tip fees. And finally are the value added outputs, renewable gases and solid biocarbons. The three listed, biochar is a fertilizer additive, biocoal is our clean fire product, so it offsets fossil coal, and finally is activated biocarbons like sulfachar. For biocoal specifically, what we are producing and what we've developed is a product that is a direct drop-in for solid coal products. So for plants like large steel mills or cement industry, we've produced a product that can go directly into these processes that by their very nature require solid carbon fuel, but by using biocoal, we drastically reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And this is one of the market catalysts and one of the market pull areas we see, particularly as governments now in Canada and in the United States with a new administration are looking at greenhouse gas as a serious emissions problem. Of course, back in January, Larry Fink of BlackRock started to remove from their investment portfolios companies that produce coal. So there is a market trend in capital markets away from coal production as well, which is a very significant indicator to us. Another market catalyst is, of course, the election in the United States. James mentioned it earlier in his remarks. But one of the important aspects, even as part of the transition plan, President-elect Biden has pledged to set enforceable limits for PFAS and designate PFAS as a hazardous substance. So PFAS is something that not a lot of people know about. If you want to see a Hollywood movie, it's called Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. If you want the most sort of well-known environmental activist, Aaron Brockovich talks very extensively about it. But basically, it's a chemical that is in Gore-Tex and Teflon and firefighting foam, basically anything non-stick that lasts forever. And if we look at everyone on this call this morning, 99% of you, if we tested your blood, would have it in your bloodstream. So it's relevant, it's in existence, and the fact that it's being designated a hazardous substance is a very strong market driver. Now, the reason I mention it being in everyone's blood is because it also comes out in other forms, including biosolids. So this is a great Vice News video that you can find. This picture shows 3 train cars. There was actually 250 of those containers on a siding in Alabama. Because of this PFAS contamination, there are significant issues and struggles with what to do with biosolids. And to give you an example, New York City spends between 50 million and 100 million per year on dealing with this. So one of our big market catalysts and really the big market pull for us and where we've gained a lot of traction is over the last 12 months, we've done a significant amount of testing with a number of major US biosolids firms, whether they manage biosolids directly or whether they're large engineering consulting firms. We've taken samples, we've done our testing up here, and we've shown conclusively that pyrolysis eliminates PFAS, it degrades it, it destroys it in that high temperature environment. And that's critical because right now, there's nothing we can really do with biosolids as this PFAS issue becomes stronger and more regulated. The other output from pyrolysis, of course, renewable gases. So one of those is renewable natural gas. So for those who just follow clean tech in general in the public markets, you'll recognize the name Zeebeck or Greenlane. They both participate in anaerobic digestion technology, primarily on the gas cleaning and upgrading side. Storm Fisher operates in this space as well. Brandon will be one of our guest speakers a little later from Storm Fisher. And anaerobic digestion, I think, is a great technology. I'm a big proponent of it. It's a great way to deal with organic wastes converted into natural gas. I mean, what could be better? The only limitation on anaerobic digestion is the availability of feedstock. And so a recent study that was commissioned by Énergir, which is Quebec's gas utility, showed that for them to hit their targets of RNG, of renewable natural gas, by 2030, over 80% of the gas would have to come from second generation technology like pyrolysis, because there's just physically not enough organic waste to put in anaerobic digesters to make this renewable natural gas. And so one of the reasons we're well positioned is that pyrolysis is already doing this. Our pyrolysis plant can already do this. So we're well positioned to capitalize on this opportunity. The other renewable gas is green hydrogen. So Ontario has just released their hydrogen strategy, which is open for comment. We're seeing a really big increase in the emphasis of hydrogen again. And from that report, pyrolysis is identified as a pathway to generate hydrogen from biomass, be it things like biosolids or wood waste or the like. And the really important part is in the last 2 slides about the gas opportunities, there's no new technology development required by Char. This is still our core pyrolysis technology, and we are ready to capitalize on these opportunities as these markets continue to develop. The final market catalyst on the output side is biocoal. We've talked about it previously. The sheer volume of coal that's being used in industrial processes in Canada is pretty significant. In the 30-year time horizon, we'll see steel mills move to things like hydrogen reduction where they don't need solid carbon. But in the next 20 years, it's going to be a big market, and producing biocoal will be one of the most efficient ways to allow these plants to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And the most important piece is that biocoal is competitive with fossil coal at a price of $100 to $300 a ton, and fossil coal, high quality fossil coal, is already in excess of $100 per ton. So we're really already there in being competitive on a fuel switch. So what's the overall business model for Char? First and foremost is we are an engineering, procurement, and construction management firm providing turnkey pyrolysis plants. And these pyrolysis plants are producing renewable gas and biocarbons. I think there's a really strong opportunity for joint ventures of pyrolysis plants for end user utility models. So we would co-own a facility, be the technology provider, and of course the end users would have a long-term contract for either the gas or the biocarbon outputs, ideally both. The reason we're well positioned for that is we're providing the entire package from feedstock handling all the way to the clean gas. So we can work very well with partners in that space. And whichever model, whether we're just selling the turnkey plants or we're a partner in those plants, we will see recurring service and monitoring contract revenue. So we'll be remote monitoring and servicing the plants. And of course, recurring biocarbon management fee. If our clients are generating waste and we are selling them a pyrolysis plant to deal with that waste on site and generate some energy for them, they're not in the biocarbon market. So we will place that biocarbon for them, and we will of course take a revenue share fee for that service, because that's just not the business that they're in. So to give you a quick example of a business case, and I think this is probably the most exciting piece, is how the economics are already favorable. So this is from an active client proposal. They're producing about 40,000 tons per year biosolids, and the plant would cost $12 million. That would be our price to the client. The plant would produce about $1.5 million a year in energy. The key is in the little brackets in my assumptions here. We're assuming $4 a gigajoule. So to put that in context, that's what most of you will pay for natural gas at your home. The price for renewable natural gas is in excess of $20 per gigajoule. So this is a very conservative estimate because we're using kind of the current market prices and not the incentivized prices. The biocarbon sale at $250 a ton, that's kind of the bargain basement price. We've seen biocarbons go for $500 or $1,000 a ton, but at $250 a ton, we know there's a home for it. So that's why we have that in there. And then finally, the transportation or tip fee avoidance by not having to try and send this material to landfill. We have that priced at $50 a ton. We're seeing prices significantly higher than that, particularly in the US Northeast and California. So even with these pretty conservative assumptions that we have in this model, there's a very attractive return on capital. So a couple quick points on the capital markets. So as of yesterday, the public own 64% of Char. Insiders have a significant stake at 30%. So we are strongly invested, and we now have institution at about 6%. So we have a strong insider ownership. All the insiders did participate in the recent private placement because we believe in the company and what we're doing. To give you an example of what else is out there, I've chosen 4 comps. They're all on the TSXV. The first 2 are generally in pyrolysis. The second 2 are in renewable natural gas. But you can see if we look at the market cap over sales, which is really the way most of these companies are looking, I think we are trading at a discount, and I think there's a pretty strong opportunity as we develop market traction and continue to grow to see that market cap to sales number move closer to what we're seeing in the market for some of our comps here. So with that, I just want to leave everyone with the idea that with Alltech, our environmental consulting side, and Char Tech Solutions, the equipment side, Char Technologies is really all about innovative solutions that contribute to the circular economy. And I think we're all very excited for how 2021 is going to look for the company and ideally for society as a whole. So with that, we're going to let James introduce our guest speakers, and then we'll have some time after that to do some Q&A.
Thanks, Andrew. Great job on the presentation. Before I introduce the guest speakers, who will have about 5 minutes each, we will try to keep the whole session to an hour, maybe slightly over. We are definitely looking forward to some questions after the guest speakers. They can be directed to Andrew about the business of Char or about the industry in general, to either Andrew or to the guest speakers. And probably the easiest thing to do is to send your questions through the chat function. You can send them directly to me or to Andrew. So keep that in mind. If you have a question now, you can put it in the chat. It'll get answered right after the guest speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Dupre. Mike is an important industry player, is at Walker, which if you don't know the name Walker, it's one of Canada's leading waste companies and an important partner to Char. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thanks, folks. Everyone hear me okay?
Sound good.
I'll share my screen here. I'll try to stay within 5 minutes here, folks. So quickly on myself, I've been with Walker for 19 years in the organics and waste space, and happy to be speaking to you folks today. Thank you very much for the time, and great to hear your presentation there as well, Andrew. So at a glance, Walker is a 5th generation family-owned company, been around since the late 1800s. We are cross-country wide now with our grease trap business, and we operate in the U.S. Via our industrial emulsion business, 2 plants in the U.S. now. About 1,200 employees, which has grown from about 300 when I started. We like to use, so I'll focus today on our environmental business. So we have 2 other operating divisions. We are Ontario's largest independent in the aggregate business, and again, the industrial emulsion business that operates in Burlington in the U.S. Our environmental business started in the 70s and has really been centered in Niagara Falls and Ontario for most of its existence. And over the last sort of 5 to 7 years has grown both organically and via acquisition in the resource recovery space. We say we like to use the landfill as a hub because we've got the large disposal asset in Niagara Falls. We do 1.1 million tons of disposal, but the accessory uses to that generate about 3x on the employment side and 2x on the sort of financial economic impact side in the community and in the business. And we do this primarily via composting, biosolid stabilization, wood recovery, both the recycled wood and railway ties, and shingle recovery. And so thinking about what Andrew's just presented, you'll see a lot of different fit and synergy between what we do at Walker as an operator and the technology services provided by Char. So we're just over halfway there in terms of our goal of recovering as much as we dispose. We do about 750,000 tons annually now. And that's on the feedstock side. So we're counting by what comes into our facilities. And the products on the outbound side include compost, potting soils, fertilizers, and low carbon fuels. A couple examples here are our soils that we sell in bags via big box stores. We sell about 8 million bags a year. Walmart's our largest retailer now. And we're really the MO here is displacing peat and utilizing compost made primarily out of leaf and yard waste. Over to landfill gas. So of course, we're utilizing landfill gas from our facility here. We've got about 25 million tons of waste in our landfill that generates, of course, a lot of different a lot of landfill gas. And all the landfills we work at all have different landfill curves in terms of that gas production. Picture up in the top left there is the pipeline going from our landfill in Niagara Falls to GM, which was recently commissioned, and I'll talk about that briefly. That project is a 6.4 megawatt power plant installation at the GM plant in St. Catharines, of course, providing a low-cost power alternative for the company and for the employees that still work there. We did that project in partnership with Comcor. who you may know in the business. We have a JV with them called Integrated Gas Recovery Services, IGRS. And we do that here in Niagara Falls, but also at other landfills across Ontario and throughout Canada. So just a picture of some things that you might be interested on your side. You know, our siloxane removal skid and our purge flare, obviously conditioning the gas before it leaves our landfill and goes through the pipeline there. Just for some context, that pipeline goes from our site, through the Niagara Escarpment, through St. Lawrence Seaway lands, and underneath a CN rail line. And so all of those require getting different sets of approvals and permits to get from our landfill to GM, which took probably about 2 years to get the paperwork side done. And of course, a little complicated going underneath through the escarpment and underneath the old canal here. Andrew mentioned RNG. So we're working on really 3 big projects in 2020. We're doubling the size of our composting facility in Arthur, Ontario. We commissioned the GM pipeline, and we have started construction on a 950,000 gigajoule per year RNG facility here in Niagara Falls. That project's in partnership again with Comcor and Enbridge. Enbridge has a dedicated injection site here to accept that RNG. And of course, once we get it into the grid, we can sell that sort of all over the place, as you know. It's a 48,000 ton per year GHG reduction project, you know, 8,750 home heat equivalency, and hope to have that online. Very confident that will be online in 2022. So a lot of the composting we do, what we don't do it so far, and Brandon's going to speak to it, is anaerobic digestion. We do aerobic composting primarily via the Gore-Tech technology. And we've got about 200,000 tons a year going through 2 major facilities, one in Niagara Falls, one in Arthur, Ontario. It's primarily at Leafing Yard and SSO, but we're also taking digester solids from the likes of the City of Toronto at our Arthur facility. So definitely a place for aerobic composting in the system going into the future. And again, as I mentioned on the Leafing Yard side, we're using that primarily in our potting soil mixtures as the peat replacement. This is the Grow Bark facility in Caledon, Ontario. We purchased Grow Bark in December of 2017. And this is important to us because, again, using, as you see in the foreground here, Leafing Yard composting in lieu of peat, and making custom blends for sort of nurseries, landscapers, and greenhouses. And this is sort of one of the sort of highest tech custom blend plants that you'll find, and you know, can make just in time products for delivery to nurseries. I briefly mentioned we collect grease trap waste across the country. But the significance here is we're also collecting liquefied food waste. So we'll collect liquefied food waste, ship it off to digesters. We'll compost the digestate or digester solids. We'll put it into a soil blend. We'll bag it, and we'll sell it back to some of the companies that we're taking the liquefied organics from. So it's a great example of the circular economy in action, and you know, a way to get organics from generators to digesters. On the biosolids front, Andrew mentioned that as well. Obviously up to speed on PFAS as well, and you know, in terms of tipping fees that you mentioned, Andrew, there, City of Toronto again has a lot of biosolids and a lot of tip fees as well. We deal with those. We've got 7 plants across Canada making 100,000 tons of product annually, and using a again sort of I would call it like sort of alkaline stabilization technology, formerly Enviro Systems, and very successful fertilizer production, sold out annually, but also do have some of the challenges that getting to land in the spring and the fall present to fertilizer companies and biosolids application companies. Walker resource recovery. So I'm going to attempt to show you a quick video at the end here. I think it's the next slide. And we have a little area that we call our Walker resource recovery area that is basically a little sort of incubator, if you will, at our landfill where we're, basically breaking grinders, I guess. Grinding up railway ties, grinding up wood, trying to recycle the low-hanging fruit in the business like shingles. And at that facility, we're grinding railway ties and making a product for Stelco where they're displacing coal in their coking process. Now it's only in the realm of 1 to 2% annually of their coal needs, but again, sort of baby steps and incrementalism along the way in terms of some sort of pyrolysis opportunity in the future there. So this is the video. It might be choppy on some of your screens depending on your bandwidth, but if you think about our landfill from a land utility perspective, it started off as agriculture. We mined out the stone. We lined it, we filled it up with waste, we capped it. We're taking the landfill gas and utilizing it, turning it into either gas for GM or RNG. And now we've brought it back to agriculture by utilizing our organic inputs. And the cool thing here is, I'm going to pause that for a second. You'll see when we go back, the agriculture yields are actually better than when we started. So from a land utility perspective, and really an example of the circular economy in action. Very proud of that project. In the background here, you see all this, what looks like a bunch of piles of junk. This is our Walker resource recovery area. So, again, wood, ties, shingles, grinders, screening plants, soils, really just doing a lot of sort of art and science type stuff out there with the low hanging fruit in the sort of LCF businesses. So here we go back into our, what we call our agricultural study. We had a Guelph University PhD student do their thesis on this plot. We have about 40 acres under production now, and we'll look to do more. Another rehab project we have actually in Vineland is we turned an old quarry into a vinifera producing vineyard, and a very successful rehab project there as well. I'll pause it one more time. And you'll see this is where we're building the RNG facility as we speak. And then the active landfill, which again, as mentioned, does 1.1 million tons a year disposal in the background there. I won't get into this slide, but I'll leave it with you. I like to blame Michigan a lot for our low tipping fees here in Ontario. And I think this might be a good segue for Brandon because really what we're talking about here is I think a gap between the public and private sectors in terms of any sort of financial mechanisms to incent more recycling on the private side, to get more, as Andrew said, more organics into the AD or reuse side of things rather than the landfill. And of course, obviously, we're doing what we can with the gas at our landfills here, but to incentivize more recycling and resource recovery out of the private sector, how can we find ways to incent companies to do that? So I will leave it there and happy to answer questions after the fact.
Thanks, Mike. I guess I shouldn't refer to Walker as a leading waste company, but maybe a leading circular economy company. But anyway, great work. Brandon, the floor is yours. Brandon, you can introduce yourself, but
Sure.
A very important partner to us, our plant at Stormfisher, where our unit is very much thanks to you and your team. So
Thanks, James. Andrew, you're on slides. I'm having internet instability issues, so I've had to switch over my phone so you guys could hear me properly. If that's okay.
Throw your slides up as soon as Mike stops sharing his screen for us.
Okay. Mike just wants to say thank you to people. Thanks, Mike. So,
Thank you, everybody.
This is Brandon Moffat from Stormfisher, VP of Development. Some of you or most of you may know Stormfisher. We have a facility in London. We're very involved in the low carbon infrastructure space. So Mike and I bump into each other quite regularly. Andrew and I as well try to be supportive of each other throughout the construction of this type of infrastructure. And our view is AD is a piece of the technology pie, but it's not the be all and end all. So whether that be what Andrew does in his technology, what Mike does in their technologies, it's an and, not an or. So it's just right understanding which feedstocks need to go to which technology to be successful, profitable, and robust infrastructure. So this is a shot from our plant from the road in behind our facility. Our site is 11 acres in size. We take in 100,000 tons a year of organic waste, going to about 130,000 tons. And we turn the food waste from restaurants, grocery stores, food processors, and municipalities into renewable electricity. We turn it into renewable natural gas, as well as we make organic fertilizers that local horticulture and agriculture are looking for. So next slide, please. So you can see a bit of the acceptable feedstocks that we take in. We are not a technology provider. We are a developer and operator of these types of assets. So we will utilize technology from around the world to have us be successful. And we work in Ontario, but we also work in other parts of Canada as well as in the US. So we act and use our own money to develop projects. And then we have financing partners. In the case of London and Drumbo, we work with Generate Capital out of San Francisco. But we work with others, whether it be for AD facilities or where Andrew kind of covered earlier, kind of renewable hydrogen or power to gas infrastructure. Then we work with other financiers in building that. We like Ontario. It is kind of the hub of organic waste processing in North America. So whether it be ourselves, Walker, and others, if you go to meetings in other sort of jurisdictions, you're likely going to find a lot of us there because we export our know-how to those markets because we've cut our teeth in Ontario. Having said that, we can do a lot more in Ontario. With the organic waste diversion policy that the previous government had put together, and this government has tweaked and modified, but is still very much a prominent part of their environmental plan, we believe that we can build a number of plants throughout Ontario to be able to the IC&I, institutional, commercial, and industrial generators, as well as municipalities. And you'll see a little later in the slides kind of our next piece of infrastructure that's coming online next week. So next slide. So here's a shot of the facility in London for those of you who haven't been there. In the bottom left corner, that is your building for Char. So Andrew worked with ourselves and our team to be able to execute that. And you guys have been a great tenant, and we try to support you wherever we can. You can see in behind on point number 1, that is our receiving hall. That's where we take in organic waste, and we separate that's the organic waste that we separate the forks and knives and plastic to create a clean feedstock that allows us to be able to digest in the facility. So that slurry then goes out to point number 2, which is our storage tanks. So it's like a buffer storage ahead of our big digesters, which you can see in behind at point 3. We do make dry fertilizer. We make liquid fertilizers depending on what the market looks for. So that's what we do in building 4. Our CHP, so taking all of our biogas, we use that in point 5. So that's 3 megawatts of electricity and equivalent amount of heat. That heat allows us to heat our digesters, to be able to dry our fertilizer down. So we use very little natural gas in this facility. So we are a carbon negative facility in terms of the sort of life cycle of carbon. And then off to the right, you can see our RNG interconnection. So Mike's facility and ours are kind of one of a few in the province that are either built or in development. But we are selling gas to the BC utilities under a long-term contract, and that equipment now is running. We actually run our RNG system flat out, and we only run 1 engine now in London because we are more profitable in doing it in that way. Next slide, please. So this is another shot from our facility looking at the Rng Injection Station. So this was done in partnership with Enbridge, and we are injecting gas, and they're able to see the quality of the gas and flow rate from their control room. This is an area that us from an advocacy side, whether it's the organic policy framework or the RNG enabling program, which is how these injection stations are to be implemented in any new projects, is something that we're spending time on. Reason for that is this could be cost prohibitive to projects kind of going forward. So it's something that we advocate for to make sure that they aren't over designed or overbuilt for the job that they're trying to do. So that's something that we pull other stakeholders together to be able to communicate both to the provincial government as well as to the utility. Next slide. So here's Drumbo. Here's a rendering from when we started the construction of it. So this is a 8-acre site along the 401 between Kitchener and Woodstock. And we bought the site from another gentleman that had a 800 ton a day SSO permit on it, and he had not constructed the 21,000 square foot building. So we looked at that and saw an opportunity to handle municipal and commercial organics, to separate out the forks, knives, and plastics from the organic slurry. So then we can send the residue to landfill. So groups like Mike down in Thorold, or we can send the liquids out, or the cake material, to our plant in London, to wastewater treatment plants, to farms and things like that. So this facility is going to be turned on next week. Next slide, please. So you saw the renderings, and here's the reality. So you get an idea of the size of the building, monoslope building. That's because we need to be able to bring in tractor trailers, walking floors, dump trailers, and the like. And we need to make sure we've got the height to be able to do that. In terms of odor control, so you guys have been very helpful and worked with us in the past and looking at carbon and biofilters and things like that. This facility had a permit for a thermal oxidizer. I wrestled with the idea of going back to the ministry and trying to change it. But as all of you know, going to the ministry and asking to amend anything would take months, if not years. And so I just followed what was in the permit. And an RTO is a very robust odor control system. It's not insignificant, but when you look at other odor control systems and not only look at the OPEX, but your time in dealing with the public and others, I decided to solve this problem with a sledgehammer. And so we put a RTO in place, and it's being fired up right now, and it will burn all the air out of that building and emit that to the atmosphere under an existing ECA. You can see in the bottom two photos the inside of the building. So the photo on the left is the tip floor. So you can see the steel embedded push walls to be able to receive organics from some of our municipal customers, as well as our commercial customers. And then the photo on the bottom right is the conveyors that will load out dump trailers for organics or residue. And we've got two Thor units set up to run there. Mike's got some as well, and others do. They're a good machine. They're out of the US. So our view is just keep it simple and do the job well. So this is, I think, one of the first purpose-built organic pre-processing facilities. What I mean by that is others are added into existing infrastructure, and it's not a knock. It's just this is the first kind of new one of its kind, and we are excited to bring this online next week. Next slide. So just in summary, we act as the developer and operator of low carbon infrastructure. You're seeing a prime focus on organic waste to RNG. We have also been active in development of renewable hydrogen or power to gas projects in Canada. The reason why is the earlier comment about Energeer and them trying to find more fuel is biomass gasification of other sorts of products we think has merit. But we also think that we can build power to gas assets as well. So that's something that we're developing and working on here at Stormfisher. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brandon. Great comments. Interesting to get your perspective and hear about what you're working on. Before we get to Peter, just a comment. This is the first time we've ever done this format, obviously, and I apologize that we're running over time. Peter, we'll ask you to keep your comments relatively brief if possible, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Anyone that needs to sign off, if you have a question and you want an answer and you're not going to be able to get it in this context of this, send in the chat either to Andrew or I, and we will definitely follow up with you personally afterwards. Again, apologies that we're running over time. I suspect we'll probably be going to 10:20 or 10:25 by the time we get through Peter's comments and then the Q&A. Peter MacArthur, to give a quick introduction, he is a very good friend to Char. He leads the Royal Bank of Canada's clean tech practice, and he's also the chair of the Ontario Clean Tech Industry Association. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, James, and I'll respect the timelines. So it's a real privilege and pleasure to be here with you today. I have been a fan of Char's, of Andrew's, and James for a long time. We've all been walking the walk and trying to talk the talk for some time, and I've been impressed with what Char has been able to accomplish, and what a triumvirate of renewable circular economy companies are here today. It's great to be here with Mike and Brandon, Stormfisher and Walker Environmental. That's a great combination. So, good for me to learn. Ontario is a hub of organic waste processing in North America. I am going to kind of quote you on that, Brandon. I think that's something we need to talk about more. So just a little bit on where I come from here, Andrew. I move ahead. So I am a commercial corporate banker. I've been doing it for a long time. You can see the gray hair. But long before that, since early days, I've been an environmentalist. And so I'm one of those lucky people that gets to combine what they're passionate about with what they do. And I think that's true of all the people that have been speaking today. But lots of people can't do that. So the Royal Bank part of it, I am part of our technology banking group, and we're supporting a wide variety of companies, ranging from early stage businesses that have done maybe a raise of $1 million to TSXV listed larger public companies, and everything in between. And the reason that we support companies through such a broad spectrum is that in technology, the growth curve can be quite steep, and particularly in clean tech, the challenge is quite significant. So I just, my volunteer part of my role is, as James mentioned, chair of the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association, and I'm on the board of the Canada Clean Tech Alliance. And what, we formed the Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association. Char was one of our very first members. Thank you for joining. Is to provide a single voice for what is a very diverse industry. And when you put it together, there's maybe 100,000 people that work in Ontario in clean technology. It's a meaningful part of Ontario's economy. It's generating really good jobs, average compensation of $90,000 each. PhDs, great science coming out of our universities, drawing on the capital structures that are available through Toronto's financial centers. It's a great industry for Ontario. Maybe go to the next one, Andrew. So, you don't need a definition of clean tech, but just, to put it in context, we're trying to deal with major issues here, with what clean technology can do to reduce humankind's impact on the environment. And just the next slide will, I just think this is a great example of clean technology. 1839 is when Edmund Becquerel first discovered the photovoltaic process. A process that produces a voltage or electric current when exposed to light or radiant energy. 1883, Charles Fritz was able to get 1% to 2% efficiency, 1% of all the energy coming from the sun into electricity coming out of it. Bell Labs, significant work in the 50s. The energy crisis in the 70s drove this to more viability. But today, and it really is, solar's really only come into its own in the last 10 years. There are contracts being let at 1 to 2 cents per kilowatt hour in many parts of the world. That is allowing us to really decarbonize. Now, not all commercial developments are 1839 to 2010, let's say. But clean tech is a tough path, and I like to, laud the investors of Char. For what you're doing, you're investing in a part of our economy that's incredibly important for all of us. Maybe go to the next one there. You don't need to know about climate change being serious. Some good quotations here. Emmanuel Macron Never has science around the world been so abundant to meet the challenges that we have. You know, in clean tech investing, when I think about it, I first met James around 2008. And at that point in time, there was a little bit of a buzz to clean tech. You know, you could make money in the tech sector, but boy, you can also make money in clean tech. And wouldn't it be great to feel good about what you're doing? A lot of people blew their brains out, made naive investments, weren't aware of the long development curves, regulatory environments. You know, both Brandon and Mike were talking about regulatory challenges. It takes a lot of stick-with-itness and tenacity. 2020 is a very different clean tech world where there's solid business fundamentals. You've got Char with Alltech having a core business that's supporting its innovation. Maybe the next one. I'm just going to say we need you involved, committed to the clean tech business. It's important to future generations. The Ontario Clean Technology Industry Association is glad to provide representation. And if you'd like to know more about Octia, please let me know. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. Great to get your perspective. Thanks to all three of our speakers. Terrific. We're going to get straight to questions because I know we're already over time. Andrew, the first question came in directly to me on the chat, and it's, can you talk and give an update on the big Defasco project? And that's all it says, but to give some context, we have a demonstration project at Defasco, which is a 20-ton project, which we got government funding for. Maybe you can give our audience an update on the Defasco project.
Yeah, absolutely. So the original Defasco project was one we announced in collaboration with Walker, which was for a 20-ton demonstration. So we make 20 tons of biocoal, and Defasco would trial it, and we were making it out of some of those wood waste residues that Mike was talking about. So that program has been successful. We produced the product, we sent it up to a Canadian government lab called CanMet. They did some testing and showed the quality of the biocarbon was realistic and would meet the challenges or the requirements of Defasco. We're now looking for that next step, which will be in order between 1,000 and 2,000 tons. And that's, you know, a pretty significant amount of biocoal. I'm not aware of any orders of that size in the Canadian markets, but it's important to do something of that scale because 1,000 tons of biocoal blended in would be basically a 6 to 8 hour test for Defasco. So it just gives an example of how much material they go through. And of course, Defasco, like many companies, was impacted by COVID. And so when we talked about timelines being extended, this is one of those projects where we saw some timelines extended. So all the technical progress has been made. We're just looking for some certainty around the timeline. So whether it's next month or whether it's in 3 months, you know, we're pretty confident we'll be moving forward with that larger production run. Just a little bit on timing right now.
Thanks, Andrew. The next question, and probably I should answer it unless you want to. When is the stock going to start to trade more? What are the initiatives on the investor relations side? It's a fair question, and I'll address it. I'd like to believe we've taken some steps. We know we've got a lot more work to do. Our private placement was definitely a help. We brought in a couple of new shareholders from British Columbia. It was a pleasure to have, as I mentioned earlier, Rand Cannon and Covista Capital as a shareholder. We also had a great guy from a family I know well, the Boldowan family. Russell Boldowan became a shareholder. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning him. And I did a brief 3-day trip to Vancouver, and I had meeting after meeting after meeting and was very well received. These are the initial steps. And I know that some of the other things that we need are large contracts, like Andrew was just talking about Defasco, other key contracts. We need to have some liquidity in the stock in terms of we need some sellers as well as buyers. At these prices, I'm not selling any Char, and neither are any of the other insiders. Well, that's a bit of a negative in the sense that if you've got someone that wants to build a position, it's very difficult for them to get much stock. So We know that there's a whole bunch of variables and factors that we need to address, and it's going to take some time to do that. We are taking those steps. We do plan in 2021 to have an in-depth investor relations program where we will increase the liquidity of the stock and get it to trade more, ideally at higher prices. And we're putting the steps in place in order to do that. Anything you want to add, Mark or Andrew?
No, sounds good.
The next question in the chat, Andrew, and you can address this. Do we expect to have growth on the engineering side of the business?
Yeah, so the engineering side, the sort of, I'll take that as environmental consulting piece. Our model was through organic growth. So we're in the process right now of looking for a new director of our compliance group. So we are planning to grow it. We're going to grow it through marketing initiatives and through increasing our bench strength versus putting large investment dollars behind the growth of that group. But we are targeting growth in that space, and we're expecting growth in the consulting group.
Okay, next question. Mike and Brandon, hopefully you're still on. The question is for you. Can you talk about how Char fits in with your plans, both at Stormfisher and Walker? What does it do, and what are you doing together is the question. But Brandon, maybe you can speak first. And I did mention that our facilities there, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and then Mike, will go to you next.
Yeah, sorry. So a couple points. So the first is on the back end for digestate management. So you guys have trialed our products, and we're interested to see if there's a relationship there from a commercial perspective. And then also understanding sort of to your point, Andrew, earlier, the PFAS and the other emerging contaminants. We've seen people knocking on our door saying, hey, can we test your material to see if we're finding these chemicals? I hope it doesn't turn from being an asset of digestate to a liability, but that's something that we're paying close attention to from the food waste side of it. The other side is you guys have supported us when we've looked at what we can do with the CO2 off of our gas upgrader. Numbers haven't necessarily worked to date, but you're a group that we lean on from that perspective. And then as we're looking to grow, we've got access to significant capital to build infrastructure. We're not technology, so it's something that we've looked to you guys to support us kind of when we're looking at new and different technologies. And so those are kind of some of the relationships that we've tried to have with you guys over the past few years.
Thanks, Brandon. Mike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of the fit and opportunity from the presentation, but really on the biosalts and wood fronts, we do a very sort of incremental growth on the organic side, and next for us on biosalts and wood is the energy play. How do we solve a disposal problem and create an energy solution? And so you need that black box in the middle, and what Char is selling definitely fits. So that's where we see growth. But you also know we have sort of gas and odor needs as well, and that's something that we will always consider going forward in addition to sort of the energy plays.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go to Maria's question, which was to everyone can see this one, Andrew, and I hope you can answer it. What is PFAS regulatory situation in Canada? Will WTP operators need to treat biosolids for PFAS removal?
Yeah, and that's kind of there's more unknown there than known. I think at some point the answer will be yes. I think the question will be more around timing. From what we're seeing, it's more of a concern in the United States, and so far that's been kind of state level. Specific states have kind of been leading the charge. Now it looks like it's going to be national. I believe strongly that it'll move to Canada as often. Sometimes we're leaders and sometimes we're followers, but we tend to be somewhere aligned with the US on a lot of policy, and I think this would be one of them.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, next question. Who's the institutional investor, and is there any analyst covering yes? For those that don't know, yes is our symbol. When we got the symbol, no, we didn't really want, and maybe wasn't available. We thought yes was the best call. whoever asked the question may have missed the beginning. So Covista Capital is our new institutional investor that was referenced and talked about in our press release. Rand Cannon, who I also mentioned, is the key contact there, one of the two partners. We're delighted to have them. We hope they're the first of many institutional investors that we gain in the years to come. In terms of analysts, we have met with probably a dozen analysts over the course of the last couple of years. I'm happy to say we have a former analyst now on our team, Mark Correll, our CFO, who was the CFO at Xenon. In the years between being at Xenon and being with us, he was actually an analyst at National Bank. So we've got someone in the tent with us who was an analyst in the past and knows what they're looking for and can help us hopefully in future get analysts to cover us. And with the analysts that we've talked to so far, and we are hopeful and we're on their, what they called on their screen, the industry term, we need to have our market cap a little bit bigger. We need to trade more and have some liquidity. And they obviously want action where an analyst will cover you when there's deal flow. And so we need to accomplish a couple of things before we're going to have regular analyst coverage. So I would say we're on the radar screen of analysts, but we don't have anyone writing research on us just yet. But we hope to in 2021 or soon thereafter. Anything you want to add, Mark, to that?
No, I think that was well said.
Okay. I believe that's all the questions. And given that we're 11:20, I think we'll call it there. We look forward very much to staying in touch with everyone. I say everyone, there's our shareholders, there's our industry partners, there's other stakeholders, there's the analysts. And this is our first time doing it this way. I really hope that next year we'll be able to be back in person and have apple fritters and have great dialogue and have a networking event that's, like nothing else in the clean tech industry. If we don't, we definitely would like your suggestions on how we could have done a better job today. Since it's the first time we've done it, we very much welcome feedback on what might have worked better. We said an hour, we're an hour and 20, so we're a little bit over. Maybe we need to learn from that. But again, your comments and suggestions on that would be welcome. If anyone wants to follow up with me, Andrew, or Mark in this room, or any one of our directors, please reach out. We'd be happy to answer questions or talk to you about the industry in general. That's it for me, unless I've missed anything.
Oh, that's perfect. I just want to thank everyone for being here with us today.
Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting.
Thank you.